All right, folks, let's look at fire and ice. Now, please remember that you need to go listen to the reading of fire and ice and examine it on your own to be able to answer the questions, but we will go ahead and look at the rhyme scheme. So please note that I do have the lines numbered. This is pretty common in poetry. It may not have every line numbered, but sometimes you'll see every 5 lines are labeled. So if we were in class and I were to ask you question about lines 4 and 5, you would know that your answer would probably be right here in lines 4 and 5. So as you can see, I have labeled the rhyme scheme for you. It's the same process that you use for really any poem. Remember, you start on this first line, and whatever that end word is, that rhyme or that sound will be labeled as A, and it's fire. So anything that rhymes with fire will also be labeled as A. Now, the end word in the second line is ice, and that does not rhyme with fire, so we're going to give it a new letter. And the next one in the alphabet is B. Now, desire rhymes with fire, so that gets to be A. Fire, well, that's just the same word, so that gets to be A too. Then we come to twice, which rhymes with ice, so that will be in the B scheme. Next, we have hate, and hate doesn't rhyme with ice, and hate doesn't rhyme with fire either. So we've got to give it the next letter in the alphabet, which is C. Then we come to ice again. That's going to be B. Then we come to great. Now, great doesn't rhyme with fire and it doesn't rhyme with ice, but it does rhyme with hate. So we'll give that. And then finally, we have suffice, which rhymes with ice. So that's going to be B. Sorry, the slide randomly switched on me. So in all, if I were to ask you what is the rhyme scheme for fire and ice, you would tell me it's A, B, A, B, C, B, C, B. And that's the pattern there. Okay, let's look at the questions that you have for fire and ice. These will be in your question document that you'll fill out and submit today. The first one is, what emotion or feeling does Frost associate with ice, and which does he associate with fire? Now, associate means kind of connect to. So there's one kind of emotion that he really connects to ice, and there's another emotion that he connects to fire. So you've got to tell me which ones those are. The second question is, do you think our world will end in Frost's fire or in ice? In other words, which of the emotions is stronger? Which do you think will win in the end? Why? So when you answer these questions, please make sure to use full sentences and several sentences, especially for the second one here, so that you can give me a very thorough answer. So don't just drop 3 words and call it a day. All right, the last poem we are going to look at today is Nothing Gold Can Stay. Now, you see that random word up there, octave. Well, if you remember, an octave is a poem with 8 lines, okay? So this is going to be 8 lines here. They're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And let's take a look at this rhyme scheme. But before we do that, I'll go ahead and read through it for you. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. So if you were reading that for the first time, you might struggle with words like subside or maybe hue, maybe even Eden. So if you don't know those words, please go look them up. Like I said, there's no shame in looking up definitions of words in poetry. In fact, that's a practice that one of my college professors made us do. So don't feel like you're cheating because you don't know a word. You're not cheating, you're just being a better scholar. So let's go ahead and look at the rhyme scheme. Well, we've got gold, and that's our first word, so it gets to be A. We've got hold, now that rhymes with gold, so that's going to be A. Then we have flower, Well, that doesn't rhyme, so we give it a new letter, B. Hour. Hour rhymes with flower, so that's another B. Then we have leaf. That doesn't rhyme with hour or flower or hold or gold, so it gets a new letter, C. Now grief rhymes with leaf, so that's going to be another C. Finally, we have day, and that doesn't rhyme with leaf or flower or gold, so we give that one the letter D. And stay rhymes with day, so it is the letter D as well. So if I were to ask you what the rhyme scheme was for this poem, it would be A, A, B, B, C, C, D, D. So for Nothing Gold Can Stay, the questions you have is to underline two metaphors that Frost uses in the poem. And then you also have, what does gold mean in this poem? And what does it mean when Frost writes that nothing gold can stay? So if you stick with me and pay attention for the next few slides, you'll have a lot better information that you can use to answer some of these questions. So first of all, let's look at some uh, figurative language. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into this poem just so I can give you some example of figurative language. The first one we're going to look at is called alliteration. Remember this is the one that I told you an example would be Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. In this case, there's part of the poem that says, so dawn goes down to day. And alliteration really just gives kind of a sing-songy feeling to poetry. And it can draw emphasis to a certain line as well. So you'll notice with this alliteration, dawn, down, and day aren't right beside each other. They have a couple words in between, but they are the significant words in this sentence. So dawn goes down to day, and you do emphasize those sounds. So they're alliterative, or this is an alliteration, because we have d, d, and d. It's three of the same consonant sounds all in a row. Let's talk about metaphor here. So when you are looking for either a simile or a metaphor, you need to be able to find meaning in it. So maybe you know that a metaphor is a comparison and that a simile is a comparison with using like or as, but maybe you feel like you can't really get to the bottom of what the author's saying. Here is a way that you can do this. You find what two things are being compared, then you make a list of the characteristics, moods, actions, or emotions that you associate with each one, and then you give meaningful and relevant characteristics from the second thing to the first thing. So let's do that. I'll go ahead and give you one metaphor that appears in the poem. It is nature's first green is gold. The two things being compared in this metaphor is nature's first green, and it's being compared to gold without using like or as. Therefore, it is a metaphor, not a simile. So let's go ahead and list out what nature's first green is. That's like the little buds and sprouts that come up around March or April in spring. So it's the first green that shows on maybe the leaves or the grass or not the leaves, on trees or grass or flowers in nature, because it's the first green, so it's going to be in spring. Now, the second thing that is being compared here is gold. And I've listed out several things that I associate with gold. I know that it's a metal. I know that it's valuable and coveted. You can use it to make jewelry or other fine goods. It's typically regarded as beautiful, and it's associated with maybe first place or the best. Think of getting like a gold medal. And it was also used as money or currency. Now, the reason I have struck out a few of these is because they don't really work in this metaphor. We want to be able to give some characteristics of gold to nature's first green. So is nature's first green a metal? Is it metallic? No, not really. Can you make jewelry out of it? I mean, you could, but it would wither up and die. Is it associated with first place or being the best? Well, this poem doesn't really mention anything about competition, so I doubt it's that one. And then, is it used as money? Not really. So if you add the characteristics of the second item to the first, the meaning of this metaphor would be that the little buds and sprouts and grasses at the beginning of spring are valuable, desirable, and beautiful. Okay, the last thing that you want to talk about with any poem is the theme, which is what is the larger idea here? Now I'm going to go back to where we have the text of Nothing Gold Can Stay so we can look at it again. Now I'm going to read through it one more time. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. So this part right here, we know that nature's first green is gold. We mean that the little sprouts in spring are very valuable, but it's the hardest hue to hold onto or to keep. And hue here means color, so it's hard to keep that color. Her early leaf is a flower, but only so an hour. This is comparing a little leaf to a beautiful bud, but only so an hour here is probably what I'd call a hyperbole, which is an exaggeration, because a leaf doesn't grow on a tree and then an hour later crumple up and die. It's more like a season. But this line is telling us that things are fleeting. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. Here in this section, it's saying that leaf will die away to a different leaf next season. And Eden, which is a reference to the Garden of Eden, that's a biblical reference. Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden. The Bible says that they committed a sin and they were kicked out of Eden. So that's saying that this paradise, which Eden was supposed to be, sank to kind of this sadness. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. Here, dawn is like the beginning of a new wonderful day, and the sun is shining over the horizon, and it's sometimes has like it looks like a sunset, but it's the sunrise, and eventually it just goes down to being a regular old day. Nothing gold can stay. So it's saying that maybe nothing that's super valuable or beautiful or coveted can stay forever. All right, guys. So make sure that you go to your questions and you finish them all. Please also listen to the readings of these aloud. If I remember correctly, I think it's Robert Frost reading his own poetry. So if you follow those steps, which it's going to take me a hot second to get back there. There we go. If you follow the steps of how to read poetry, you should be able to break it down and really get some meaning of it. So listen to the recordings of the poem, read the whole poem on your own, break them up into chunks or stanzas. Then for each chunk, find words that you do not know, whether it's a reference to Eden or it's a word like subsides. Look them up either on the dictionary or just the web. Then summarize the stanza chunk briefly in your own words. That's kind of what I was doing with Nothing Gold Can Stay. And then look for ways that the author uses figurative language and other literary devices and think about how that adds to the power of the poem. That's also what we just did with Nothing Gold Can Stay. All right, guys, have a good day, and I'll see you. Well, I won't see you tomorrow unless you come to office hours, but I will be speaking to you virtually tomorrow. All right, bye, guys.